Vice President Kamala Harris was in North Carolina today laying out her economic proposals focusing on food prices, taxes, housing, and medical costs, which she says will empower the middle class.
When I am elected president, I will make it a top priority to bring down costs and increase economic security for all Americans. As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans, like the cost of food. We all know that prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed. But our supply chains have now improved, and prices are still too high. A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%. Many of the big food companies are seeing their highest profits in 2 decades. And while many grocery chains pass along these savings, others still aren't. Look, I know most businesses are creating jobs, contributing to our economy, and playing by the rules. But some are not. And that's just not right. And we need to take action when that is the case. As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication, and companies that conspired with competitors to keep prices of electronics high. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gouging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules. And we will support smaller food businesses that are trying to play by the rules and get ahead. We will help the food industry become more competitive because I believe competition is the lifeblood of our economy. More competition means lower prices for you and your families. Now compare what Donald Trump plans to do. He wants to impose what is, in effect, a national sales tax on everyday products and basic necessities that we import from other countries. That will devastate Americans. It will mean higher prices on just about every one of your daily needs. A Trump tax on gas, a Trump tax on food, a Trump tax on clothing, a Trump tax on over-the-counter medication. And you know, economists have done the math. Donald Trump's plan would cost a typical family $3,900 a year. At this moment, when everyday prices are too high, he will make them even higher. As president, I'll take on the issue of the cost of health care. As Attorney General, I took on insurance companies and big pharma and got them to lower their prices. And together with President Biden, we've gone even further. We capped the price of insulin at $35 a month, and the total cost of prescription drugs at $2,000 a year for seniors. We let Medicare negotiate lower drug prices for seniors. And just yesterday, we announced that we are lowering the price by up to 80% for 10 more life-saving drugs. And I pledge to continue this progress. I'll lower the cost of insulin and prescription drugs for everyone with your support, not only our seniors. And demand transparency from the middlemen who operate between.
All right, folks, just having some issues there with the video of Vice President Kamala Harris. Guys, let me know when we have that taken care of. What's interesting about this speech, you've had all these different media people, others saying, oh, she needs to release a plan, more details. And then, of course, after it was over, if you watch any of these networks, she needs more detail. You're like, really? That's how we're going to do this? And so that's sort of the thing that you constantly hear. So the first there you heard talking about food prices. Do we have the video fixed, folks? Okay, all right. So we're going to try to get that because she also laid out what she wants to do when it comes to housing. That, of course, is a dramatic issue right now in this country because of high rental prices. Also, you have, of course, lack of affordability in the country, and there are numerous reasons why that's the case that often don't get talked about. And the vice president tried to actually address that by talking about increasing the housing stock in this country. And so we're going to break this thing down because if you watch a bunch of these other different people, you see them saying, well, this is too progressive. It's not moderate. It's not she's taking this idea from Republicans, all this sort of stuff along those lines. And for me, I don't actually see how her proposal is so unbelievably crazy progressive. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And so joining us right now to break this down and to understand it, let's bring up our first guest. She's an economist, been often on the show. She's with the American Economic Liberties Project, Morgan Harper. Glad to have Morgan here. Also, Dr. Courtney Johnson-Rose. She's president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Morgan, I want to start with you. I'm going to start with you because I want to deal with the economic piece. I want to deal with the economic piece, the food, then I want to go to housing. So first off, when she's talking about food, all of these people and I see these people going, oh, well, this is ridiculous. The grocery stores, they only have a 1 to 3% profit margin. They're not price gouging. What they're overlooking are all of these food companies that are price gouging. Companies that have been shrinking packages, the size of foods, but also increasing their prices. And so the way I got it, she wasn't talking just about grocery stores. She was talking about the food industry as a whole.
Exactly. And I think she was very precise in her choice of words. She said big food companies. And just like you're saying, Roland, it's like that does not mean that we are talking about our mom and pop grocery store down the street or an independent retailer. In many cases, it might not even mean that we're talking about your local chain per se. We're talking about the giants of the food industry that took advantage of consumers during the pandemic. The Kroger CEO was on the record during an investor call saying that inflation was good for them. It's a chance to raise prices on consumers. They're trying now to merge with Albertsons and get even bigger and lay workers off like they've done before. It's also the food suppliers. And I think this is a critical point. She didn't get into it in the speech, but there's some price fixing going on there, too, with this company AgriStats that the Department of Justice is suing, that they are finding ways to collude with each other to increase the cost of meat. That then where does that cost have to go? It's not just going to stay with the suppliers. The suppliers have to pass it on to us as consumers. And so she very much was distinguishing between most businesses, which are hiring people, supporting communities, spurring economic growth, and some of these giants that are trying to break the law and take advantage of consumers and other businesses that are in the market.
Yeah, you also have people, the other day Donald Trump was complaining about the price of eggs, things along those lines. Well, you notice they didn't bring this up. Go to my iPad, Anthony, where you had U.S. egg producers that were involved in a price fixing scandal. That actually happened. So this idea of this was from December 2023. So to complain about, oh my God, the price of eggs is up 48%, and you leave out the price fixing scandal, well, hello, and this involved Cal Maine. What does it say here? The country's biggest egg producer.
Exactly. And, you know, this idea that this is left or this is Republican or whatever, I think we're entering, and I don't know what you think, I think we're entering this new phase where who cares what you call it? It's reality. It's the reality that most people are experiencing in their lives on a daily basis. And they want politicians, they want elected officials, they want the government to be responsive to that. And I don't know. I mean, to me, that's what I heard of a lot in her speech was like, it sounded like a lot of things that I hear people talking about.
Right.
And that she has some specific ideas of what to do about it.
And again, the problem here is people don't understand these specifics. They don't understand. Listen, the average person is like, yo, I go to the store, I buy stuff, it's high. They're not realizing, okay, as you said, the distribution companies, the deliverers, the food companies themselves, these public companies, and also what all these people were trying to do is, again, recouping their money after COVID. All of these things were actually happening. Also, I want to deal with this because she mentioned competition. And you've mentioned numerous times on this show, Kroger, Albertsons, and Robert Rice talks about this all the time as well. When you have monopolies, and not having competition, they're able to increase prices, and you can't do anything about it because they're the only game in town. And so the Biden-Harris administration has been very aggressive with the Federal Trade Commission in blocking a lot of these mergers. And you've had people like the CEO, David Zaslav of Warner Discovery, who was like, hey, I don't care which party wins. I just want somebody to win who's going to allow for mergers and acquisitions, which really means Donald Trump, because they don't want there to be more competition. They want consolidation. They want not monopolies.
Exactly. And I think another critical point with this is that is another one of these threats to democracy. We talk a lot about the threat of having people who don't care about norms in government, who, you know, break laws. But part of the reason why we found ourselves in this mess is once a company gets that large to do whatever they want in the marketplace, then they can also take that power and buy off a lot of politicians to make sure that they don't do anything to stop them or reduce their market influence. And, you know, unfortunately, that's what we have heard from former President Trump talking to big oil executives in his own home saying, hey, essentially government's for sale. Pick me, I'll give you a loan. Meanwhile, the Federal Trade Commission coming out saying we're going to take on collusion of that was happening in big oil industry that's increasing gas prices. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it does seem like there's a pretty clear contrast here. This should not be controversial stuff. I mean, making sure that you don't have landlords, you know, moving to another one of the issue areas that came up in housing, landlords that are able to price fix, just find like the absolute maximum that people are able or willing to pay and go there and then spread that information throughout the country. That should not be political. That should just be exactly what it is, which is illegal and stopped.
Okay, so let's play the rest of the video because she also got into housing, and I want to move towards that. So go ahead and play it.
And I pledge to continue this progress. I'll lower the cost of insulin and prescription drugs for everyone with your support, not only our seniors. And demand transparency from the middlemen who operate between Big Pharma and the insurance companies who use opaque practices to raise your drug prices and profit off your need for medicine. 2 months ago, I announced that medical debt will no longer be used against your credit score. And I will work as president with states like here in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, thank you again, to cancel medical debt for more and more, millions more Americans. As for Donald Trump, well, he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which 45 million Americans rely on, 45 million Americans rely on it for health care. That would take us back to a time when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We all remember what that was. And we're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. And remember, and this is why we're not going back, because we do remember, he tried to cut Medicare every year he was president, threatening a program that tens of millions of seniors count on. And according to his Project 2025 agenda, he intends to undo our work to bring down prescription drugs, the cost of prescription drugs, and insulin costs. Well, we've come too far to let that happen. So we're not going back on that, and let's talk about the cost of housing. So now, the housing market can be complicated, but look, I'm not new to this issue. As State Attorney General, I drafted and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first in America. And during the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big banks for predatory lending with many of my colleagues, including Roy Cooper, and won $20 billion for California families when I was Attorney General. So I know how to fight for people who are being exploited in the housing market. And I know what home ownership means. It's more than a financial transaction. It's so much more than that. It's more than a house. Home ownership and what that means, it's a symbol of the pride that comes with hard work. It's financial security. It represents what you will be able to do for your children. And sadly, right now, it is out of reach for far too many American families. There's a serious housing shortage. In many places, it's too difficult to build, and it's driving prices up. As president, I will work in partnership with industry to build the housing we need, both to rent and to buy. We will take down barriers and cut red tape, including at the state and local levels. And by the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class.
All right, folks, so let me explain something to you again that people don't necessarily think about. This year marks the 90th anniversary of the Federal Housing Administration. Go to my iPad. This was the press release that HUD's posted in June. And so it talks about, so this was created under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This was part of the National Housing Act of 1934. Now, the press release didn't talk about this here, but the reality is this here. This same act is what instituted racism in America, okay? It instituted housing racism. And so what we saw here was, with this particular act here, so I'm gonna scroll down here, and I'm gonna pull this up right here. So key events. So you see right here, signed into law June 27, 1934. It said right here, 1950. The Housing Act of 1950 amended the National Housing Act to encourage the production of housing for middle class families, and established Section 213 for mortgage insurance on cooperative housing projects. Okay, I want y'all to hear that again. what I just told you. In 1950, the Housing Act of 1950 encouraged the production of housing for middle-income families. What did Vice President Kamala Harris just say? Wanting to build more homes, wanting to build new homes. Now, check this out. And y'all have heard me discuss this over and over and over again, the housing crisis in America. Go to my iPad. And I've been covering housing my entire career. What you're seeing right here are the number of homes built in the United States between 1900 and 2021. So if you go to the beginning of the 1900s, okay, you saw 1.78, 2.652, 4.16, 2.67, 4.79, boom! It jumps to 10.08. Oh, I'm sorry. When was that? 1950 to 1959. So, why is that important? That's after World War II. So, guess what did you then have? You had, of course, all of those soldiers coming back home, GI Bill, buying homes. So you see the explosion. So let's go. 1960 to 69, 9.49 million homes built. 1970, 1979, 12.37 million homes built. 1980, 1989, 12.14 million built. 1990 to 1999, 12.49. 2000 to 2009, the most homes ever built in American history, 14.56 million. But what happened? The housing crisis, because of free money, no standards, and America went haywire. What happened then? Housing crisis, 2008, 2009, 2010. It crumbled. Prices dropped. Folks, 53% of black wealth wiped out. Folks were losing their homes because of balloon notes, all those different things. What then happened? To go back, 2010, only 6.9 million homes built. There was a housing crisis. And so home builders were not building homes. Again, 6.9 million. When is the last time we built less homes than that? Right there, 1940 to 1949. Okay, now let's go right here. So here we are, 2010, 2019, 6.9 million homes. Now, this chart was done in 2021. The problem is we are building fewer homes in 2020 present day. So now that means that we have back-to-back decades. Now we're a decade and a half, or we are so far behind of building new homes. You have significant housing demand. More people, more demand, fewer homes. Plus, private equity has been snapping up homes left and right. It's estimated by 2030, private equity will be owning 40% of all U.S. homes in the country. So, when Vice President Kamala Harris unveils a proposal today saying we're going to build 3 million new units over the next 4 years, she is trying to say we have to catch up because of the problems that we had in the housing market all of the last 2 decades. And so for everybody sitting out there, and you're like, my rent went up, it keeps going up. Here's why it's going up. There are people right now who should be owning homes who can't. Not just because of mortgage interest rates going up, but because private equity has been buying them. Second of all, and my next guest will explain this as well, baby boomers are holding on to homes. See, you got to put all this stuff together. Typically what happens, baby boomers get older, then they sell homes, they might move into condos, they might move into homes with their families. That's not what's happening. They're living longer. And so all of these factors are what's driving the housing crisis. So it's easy to say, Biden's fault, rent's going up. No, it's not. Right here, when you had homes that were built in 2010, Obama was president. He's vice president. That was happening. And so we have to have a deeper understanding of what's happening in the housing market. And so we're going to play a video later from Robert Reich. I think it's really important as well. But let me bring in Dr. Courtney Johnson-Rose. Courtney, what you heard from the vice president today, I think speaks to where we are. First-time home buyers, $25,000 tax credit. Why is that important? Because now, if they have 10%, now I got that $25,000, that really helps. But also, you've got to build more housing stock to drive down these prices because you have pent up demand. Yes or no?
Yes. And Roland, you are so spot on this conversation. Housing is everything. And when we look at this is simply supply and demand. And the supply and demand chain has just been off for so many years. But what we're seeing at NARAB is that it is the biggest impediment to Black home ownership is not our credit, not that we have bad credit, not that we don't have any money, and not that we don't have jobs. It's that there's no housing to purchase because the housing supply has been so low. You mentioned a couple of things. One, baby boomers are not moving. They're staying in place because they don't have anywhere to downsize to, which means houses are not coming on the market. Institutional investors, 28% of the market right now, and it's growing every single year, are being by institutional investors.
And Courtney, here's the problem. You may have customers. You may have folks that are trying to buy a home, and they've scrapped their money together, and they're like, we really want to buy a home. But then all of a sudden, private equity comes in, and they're like buying a house in cash. So now a homeowner's like,
no inspection. How can you compete with that?
Right. And the reason I paid off. Listen, I filed for bankruptcy in 2004 because of health issues, because of medical bills. But I came out of that bankruptcy in 2008. Part of the reason why I filed because they were trying to foreclose my home. I then owned that home outright 4 years later. For the last 5 years, they have blown my phone up with text messages, phone calls, call my daddy, call my sister, call my mama, and it's like, trying to sell your home? I'm like, hell no, stop calling me. And so they want to pay for cash because I own it outright.
Yes.
And that's what's happening. So a lot of people, and the reason I'm not selling, because my parents are 77, they live in my home. I've had nieces and nephews who've also lived there as well. So that actually helps my family economically because they're not having to be in this housing market because I own it. But what we're dealing with is, right now, you have regular, ordinary people, they cannot compete against private equity with all their money.
They can't. If they present an offer, Roland, that has, we need 3% help towards closing costs, so we're using a down payment assistance program, they cannot compete against private equity firms that are cash, no appraisal, no inspection, and close in 7 days. So what it makes it is that our buyers that are qualified can't find a home. Fannie Mae has a stat out now that shows that there's more than 2 million mortgage-ready Black Americans. That means they have the credit, they have the income to purchase a home, but there's not a home out there available for them. So this plan from Vice President Harris is exciting. It's spot on. It's what's needed to spur the economy. The other thing that we're experiencing is our people are paying so much in rent. It's unreal. We have families that 60 to 70% of their income is spent just for a rent.
But first of all, you just said it. You just said there are 2 million eligible Black people. They should actually be homeowners.
They should be homeowners. They should need rent.
Right. So the problem is when you can't get a home, you have to rent. Now the folks with the apartment, they know pent up demand, so they like add 500, add 800, add 1,000. Now you have no choice because you can't go anywhere. So if you're not building apartment complexes, if you're not building new homes, then this problem simply intensifies and gets worse. And so you have to have, and I had somebody in a chat like, Roland saying vote blue no matter what. No, this is affecting Republicans, conservatives, white people, Latinos. I mean, I went back and looked, Courtney, it's crazy. I went back and looked at the neighborhood that I grew up in. Okay. And I've been back. I'm looking at home prices and I'm like,
that makes any sense.
Literally, I'm talking about, I'm looking at home prices, houses, not even 1,500 square feet, 1,800 square feet that are $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000.
20, 30-year-old homes too.
That's insane.
It's unreal. And then you couple that, Roland, with the high interest rates. And now your monthly payments are just astronomical. The other thing that we're seeing is that the number one group that is becoming homeless are older Black women that are on fixed income. So what happens, the people that should be buying a home don't have a home to buy. So now they're in the rental community.
Somebody just posted in our chat, my studio apartment is $1,875 a month. What's crazy, Courtney, when I bought my house and I had a high interest rate, the note was $1,400.
Yes, my first house was $897. 2-bedroom, 2-car garage, townhome, $800 a month. It doesn't exist anymore. You can't rent anything for $800 a month.
So the only way to deal with this, the federal government has to come in and say we have to spur the building of new homes. And so all of a sudden, if you now have 3, 4, 5, 6 million, she's simply saying we got to play catch up. Because then, so doing that, that's going to actually decrease the pent-up demand. And then what's going to do is it's going to force those folks who are with the renters. Now people are going to have more options. They have to bring down prices.
It's going to take that competitiveness off out of it and bring down price. And I love your analogy, Roland, about how FHA has done it before. It's why it was created. Yeah. It's the tool. So now we have to use the tool. Yeah. To do it again. But that's what the tool was created to actually do. And her plan is utilizing the tool that's at our fingertips to be able to spur this economy. The other thing I want to mention is that housing affects so much of the economy. You have construction workers that get jobs. You have people that buy new furniture. You have real estate brokers that get paid, inspectors, appraisers, mortgage companies. It's a whole industry. Yep. We can also be excited about her bringing this industry back to life that has been suffering over the past few years.
Yep, absolutely. And so I just, for people out there, they really need to understand how deep and broad this is. And it's not just so simple as, well, it's Biden's fault, it's Harris's fault, or if a Republican was in place. We have to recognize the crisis that we are in right now was 20 years in the making. And Courtney, I'll be honest, I remember, and people were mad at me because I was critical of President Obama in 2009 and 2010 when I said, don't let the banks off the hook. Because what happened, Courtney, was we bailed the bank. Remember those, it was called toxic assets. Those were the home mortgages. We bailed the banks out. They held onto those home loans. And when they recovered, they were selling 25,000 lots to private equity, and that's where we are right now, right?
Yeah, and what happens with the private equity that hurts so bad is that they buy in our communities, Roland. They get the properties, pennies on the dollar, they turn them around, and they make them rental units.
Boom.
So we end up renting the same property that we should have the opportunity to buy. We end up renting them, and we never get it back as part of the housing stock. It turns into a permanent rental property that these companies do, and then they collect rent from us.
And then they add the other piece, because you know this as well. When neighborhoods transform from being homeowners to renters, that actually drives down those neighborhoods because those folks are transient, so they're not taking care of their yards. They're not fixing up their properties, not investing in their properties. So the value of the neighborhood can actually go down when it becomes a rental neighborhood.
And if you're a homeowner in that neighborhood, now your value is decreased because the institutionalized investors that, by the way, don't live in the same state, by the way, don't keep up the actual property, by the way, use an outside property management company. So that value now is taken away from our communities when there's people that could be homeowners in those properties.
Absolutely. So I hope folk first of all, I guarantee our audience got way more out of this than what in the hell they could get on CNN and the rest of these people. Because they're focused on political stuff when, no, this is a real issue when it comes to housing.
People's issue. We're so excited to hear it and to hear it being addressed in such a robust way. It is what is needed, and it is what will help communities move forward. And you mentioned this too, Roland. This is not just a Black problem. This is an American problem.
Yep, absolutely. It's in neighborhoods and cities all across the country. Courtney Johnson Rose, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.